We've got a great guest for you today, but I want to remind you that number one, listen, if your season is over, I think you can go to Underdog Fantasy and start all over again. That's right. We're going to be announcing a partnership, and Underdog Fantasy is one of the ones that I like to use. And I would implore anybody else who's out there, you're thinking like, my season's over. I drafted Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and I'm stacking them up. Well, you know what? All that gets erased away. You just go sign up with Underdog Fantasy right now, and that can be changed. But our guest coming on today, I'm sure she's killing it in her fantasy league. She is one of the brightest minds in all of fantasy football. There are few people that I trust more than her. So please welcome back to the show our friend, Samantha Previte.
Hi.
Hi
that was
there.
quite the intro.
Listen, it is a well-deserved intro. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for that. By the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I live in California, and we have all kinds of air quality issues. We have wildfires, dust, pollution from car emissions, COVID cases on the rise. That's why I got an air purifier. You live in Denver, Colorado. That rarefied air is so good, but I'm in California. I need an air purifier, which is why I went out and got one from Air Pura, and I put it in the house. It looks like a little R2-D2. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan. Little R2-D2 running around the house. It looks amazing. So not all of us are blessed to live in Colorado like you, but if not, you can go out and get a quality air purifier from companies like Air Pura. And I got that pitch in, but how are you?
I might need that too. We've got wildfires. We've got thin air up here. So, people carry around oxygen and stuff, especially people from like sea level. It's an unforgiving landscape. I live in Breckenridge, actually. So I actually live at.
I don't want everybody to be able to find you. You got to do the why. Like I always say, like I'm in LA because you don't want people to be like, what's your street address? So like, I'm just trying to play it cool.
Fair enough. I mean, Breckenridge is big enough. It's fine. But yeah, I live at approximately 10,000 feet. So I'm always.
Oh my gosh.
When I went to LA, actually, I was like, wow, I feel like I can run a marathon.
Look at this. Yeah. Sprinting around.
Oxygen.
This is what it's like to breathe, which is why I'm glad I have the Air Pura. How are your fantasy teams, though? Talking about that. How did you do in week one? You okay? How are we feeling?
I'm okay. I had a mixed bag. I will say, like, at least some of the duds were all on the same team. Like, I had a team that started out with Cam Akers, so that didn't do super well. And then I had, like, Cole Kmet or Darnell Mooney. I'm not sure which one on that team. And then like had Allen Robinson, maybe like a whole bunch of just like the guys, and like T. Higgins was on that team too. Not his fault, obviously. Leaves the game in the first quarter, but like, what can you do? And I had him stacked with Joe Burrow, and that league takes a lot off for like efficiency and interceptions and stuff like that. So I saw that like in normal scoring, he had over 20 fantasy points because I mean he did do a lot of throwing, but I think that he had like 7 fantasy points in this league. So it was one of those ones that it's almost so bad I want to like tape it to the fridge.
Yeah, you just, you know what? Sometimes you just got to flush that. I get a lot of lineups. Like people submit lineups and they're like, I lost this week. What do I do? I'm like, well, you drafted good players. They're going to come through. Aaron Jones is going to be fine. Dalvin Cook's going to be fine. There's no reason to be concerned about that. But there are some places where you can draw some concern. And obviously with the injuries, including one to Dak Prescott, who is going to miss a couple. Well, depending on who you talk to, Dak Prescott himself thinks he could miss 2 months. Jerry Jones thinks he's going to miss a half. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm sorry, Dr. Jones. Apparently this isn't a significant injury. But for those of us playing fantasy football, if we drafted Dak Prescott, and what do we do on the waiver wire? I know it's a little bit late now, but maybe you missed out on picking somebody up. Who are some good quarterbacks that you can use to replace Dak Prescott this week?
Sure. So I just want to say that anything that Jerry Jones says, I just assume is cap. So I'm going to assume that like Dak Prescott has a better understanding of his type of recovery time than the owner of the Cowboys. But in terms of like guys you need to pick, I mean, first I would just cry. Like, but second, after
I've done that already.
Through the tears, it's it's like the stages of grieving. So after that first stage, you have to head to the waiver wire. Hopefully you did snag someone. There are a few guys that I was really targeting, and those were Jameis Winston and Carson Wentz would probably be the top ones that I was looking at. I mean, Jameis Winston has that back injury right now, but he is expected to go. I like the matchup this week. So, and he's like a type of guy that I think like season long, if he can stay healthy, he's like a top 12 type guy. I mean, he did get saved by that very monster fourth quarter, the first 3 quarters. Let's just like forget about that. But, but that's the thing, like his games are not always the easiest to watch.
No,
but
never.
It gets done. So I'm like, it's sometimes a little bit frustrating, but like at the end of the day, he had over 20 fantasy points. You're like, hey, I'm good with that. Carson Wentz, he had credit where credit was due. He had a really good game. He outperformed what I thought he would even do. Now, he's not going to play the Jaguars every week, but he does have a pretty soft schedule coming up. I mean, he plays Detroit this week. I don't think that they're necessarily as much of a cakewalk as they have been in previous years, but I was impressed with what I saw. I mean, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, finished as the QB3 for fantasy. So those were 2 guys that at least before waivers ran were over 50% available in Yahoo leagues. So, I mean, they were out there. If you're in a deeper situation, or if you're in like a 2 QB league where you need to replace Dak, and I mean, I would maybe be looking at like guys like Baker Mayfield or I don't know. There's a number of guys.
There are a number of guys out there. You mentioned that
Marcus Mariota, maybe with the rushing, like that could be interesting. There are going to be a lot of high like games where they're behind a lot. So
yeah, he had 70 rushing yards. I mean, that's not insignificant. That's a touchdown, basically. So that is that translates. And of course, most fantasy leagues reward the running quarterbacks more than the traditional passers. What did you think of Trevor Lawrence? Did you get a chance to see much of his game? I thought that he looked good, and the fantasy point totals weren't, what I wanted them to be. But when I went back and watched the game, I was a little bit more encouraged. There were just a couple of plays that got called back, just missing Travis Etienne in the end zone. I'm like, God, he's close. How do we feel about him going up against the Colts?
Yeah, I actually really like a lot of the Jaguars this season because I think there's that like post-hype sleeper appeal to some of them, because I think there were these unrealistic, lofty expectations put on the Jaguars at like last year. They were this like 0 to hero type team, and people were like, oh, they're going to win 8 to 10 games. And obviously they did not do that. They were, and that's just a really difficult thing for teams to do. So I think, he looked pretty good, and they're going to be better than people expect at this point, but probably not great, but good enough. I mean, we've seen lots of quarterbacks, especially for fantasy, do well. And to your point about like the fantasy stat line maybe not being that great, I mean, there were a lot of guys this week that just like the fantasy points did not tell the whole story type thing. Like they're not going to tell you that, Travis Etienne had that drop or anything like that. So, I have faith in the Jaguars. I think he is a very solid QB2 rest of season.
Yeah, I just can't bring myself to go after Carson Wentz. There's just something I don't know. Am I a bad person? I just don't feel like I want to, but I just can't do it.
Okay, so I think it's just like you have to be prepared to be hurt by him too, because like the range of outcomes for this guy is just so wide. Like I could see him going like QB3 like he did, and then I can also see him laying a bagel. So like it's tough to say. He's just, but yeah, like after a certain point when you're not getting Josh Allen off the waiver wire. So at some point, like you're just going to have inherent risk built into some of these guys. I'm just saying he's like one of the quote unquote best ones available if you're like a Dak manager and you really need someone to go out there. I mean, you really need someone in your QB spot.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I don't know if this is the proper comparison, but it feels very Ryan Fitzpatrick like that. Hey, huge game. We're like, you know what? Everybody, we're in. Like, there's no way this can go wrong. He's back. And then you start him and he goes out there and he throws like 4 interceptions. And you're like, what did I do? Maybe he should just go out there. I feel like if he went out and did something crazy, like dyed his beard black, like then maybe like be a little bit more heelish. Like he's almost too nice. Like he's a nice person, but it's like, you need an edge, Carson Wentz. Like go out there, get a black beard like Hogan when he was part of the NWO, and then just kind of like take that persona and see what he can do. And maybe that can translate. But Before we
He needs to start dressing like Ryan Fitzpatrick at those press conferences, because that was some swag.
Get some Hawaiian shirts. You would look pretty sick. But we talk about Dak Prescott, and obviously the impact is not just at the quarterback position. It does filter down to the wide receiver. I have way too many shares of CeeDee Lamb. I felt like I was talked into CeeDee Lamb during the offseason. I am sitting here not feeling great. What is your outlook for CeeDee Lamb with Cooper Rush as the quarterback?
Adam, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty concerned. And the thing is that it's not just Cooper Rush. I am concerned because CeeDee Lamb did not look great when Dak was on the field. I mean, Dak played most of that game. CeeDee Lamb caught 2 passes on 11 targets. That's a 27% target share for 29 yards, finished as the wide receiver 75 in half PPR. So not a great time for CeeDee Lamb managers, obviously. I don't know if it's like the dynamic on the field because they got rid of Amari Cooper and now they have a whole bunch of like D-list type guys out there. No offense, but guys that are just not going to draw a lot of coverage. And then he's going to get double teamed and he maybe just can't deal with that. Like, he needs a complementary type piece. And I don't know. He just did not look great in that game. I don't want to overreact too much, but yeah, with the Cooper Rush thing, I will say the only saving grace here is that when Dak Prescott didn't play in 2020, when Andy Dalton had to pinch hit, CeeDee Lamb wasn't a complete flop. And all those guys were okay, not great. They're not as good as they would be with Dak. So I think like CeeDee Lamb in my head gets downgraded to a wide receiver 2 at this point, which is disappointing, but not like, oh, you got to just flat out sit him every week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that a lot of us can afford to sit him, even despite the downgrade at the quarterback spot. And you know, I go to the saving grace of Cooper Rush last year in the one game that he played. He did win, and he did pepper Amari Cooper with 14 targets. But then we saw last week, CeeDee Lamb had a bunch of targets, and it didn't translate. But we just got to sit there, hope for the best, keep hitting the waiver wire, look for guys like Kyle Phillips to put on your bench. Maybe someday we have to make that switch, but it's depressing. And again, for a guy that I didn't even want to draft, but I was sitting there with Matt Harmon's draft tiers, and even in the Yahoo drafts, this is why I play Underdog now, because Underdog wouldn't have led me astray like Yahoo did. I'm like, why did I listen? See, I didn't want him, and I got talked. This is why I got to just drown out the noise during the off season and another guy that I really loved during the off season, who I didn't get enough shares of, was Saquon Barkley. Is Saquon back?
I'm going to say he's back. Obviously, with the asterisk until he gets injured. I mean, he looked like Saquon, vintage Saquon from 2 years ago, put up nearly 200 yards of scrimmage on the Titans, finished as the RB1 in every format. I mean, you gotta he passes the eye test. He looks great. So, and the thing is that, yeah, you can say he's injury prone, but every running back out there is being exposed to injuries at a higher rate than probably a lot of other positions. So it's not like, oh yeah, like him versus like Joe Mixon, he's not injury prone. I'm like, no, they're all kind of exposed to a certain degree of it. And, you know, Saquon Barkley, I think he just still has a lot of tread left on the tires there. So I think, yeah, there was trepidation about him going into the draft, but you know, not everyone, but a lot of people were all in on Christian McCaffrey. And it's like, if you were giving Christian McCaffrey the benefit of the doubt there, you probably had to give Saquon Barkley the same benefit of the doubt, because they've kind of missed the same amount of time, maybe a little bit different types of injuries. But I mean, he looked great right out of the gate. So, I mean, he could be the RB2, RB1 for fantasy this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, that is going to be one I feel like I regret not drafting CeeDee Lamb and not taking Saquon Barkley. and last year, you know what? Derrick Henry got hurt, and that guy's built like a brick outhouse, and he got hurt. Everybody gets hurt. Joe Mixon, as you mentioned, for a long time was injury prone. Last year, one of 4 players to have 1,500 scrimmage yards and 15 touchdowns. So you're injury prone until you're not. I love Saquon this year. Didn't like the situation with Eli Mitchell. I thought that was unfortunate that the injury wasn't even running the football on the play that he got injured on. Jeff Wilson Jr. seemed to be the hot pickup on the waiver wire. Is he the guy to have in San Francisco?
Oh God. So first, like even with Eli Mitchell, I already had trust issues with Kyle Shanahan. Like it's obviously it's not just unfounded. Everyone kind of feels the same way about 49ers running backs. The correct answer, like which 49ers running back you want to have, is Deebo Samuel, obviously.
Yeah.
So everyone else is just vying for that number 2 spot. Now, that said, like Jeff Wilson was pretty unremarkable in the game. I mean, Elijah Mitchell left pretty early, so there were definitely a lot of opportunities. Now, I get it. This game was like very weird, though. I mean, it would have lent itself more to rushing if really if you look at it. But I mean, I think that there were elements of it that were just kind of weird, and I don't want to take too much from it. He saw 9 carries for 22 yards, caught a couple of his targets for 8 yards. So yeah, like I said, not super head turning. I did not advise people to go out and like spend 100% of their fab on Jeff Wilson, because it's like, okay, yeah, we've seen this movie before, right? Have you not seen this movie before where you're like, oh, I've got to go out and get JaMychal Hasty or whatever. And then like, because JaMychal Hasty had, 20 carries in one game, and then the next game he's got 2 or
nothing.
Benched. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that they're probably going to have to lean on some of the younger guys. Tyrion Davis-Price was the healthy scratch in that game. He may have to kind of step up. And I know there's another guy that was an undrafted free agent whose name is escaping me right now, but I think that they're kind of going to end up having to paste it together instead of like relying on one dude.
It doesn't matter what his name is. I don't even bother to learn their name. It's like my daughter with the LOL dolls. It's like once you bought one, it's like you have to buy all the rest of them. And that's the way it is with San Francisco running backs. It's like now you need every single one of them. I don't know why. I don't know how I ended up with Eli Mitchell in the first place. Now I've got a roster full of random 49er running backs, and I hate it. I should just cut bait and be like, I'm just going to – I know I can put Eli Mitchell on IR. I might just release him. Like, I don't want the head up anymore. I'm done with it. I'll just take this.
I mean, it's always a roller coaster with the 49ers running backs. So I was disheartened because I knew that there were risks drafting Eli Mitchell going into the season. Obviously, he was a little banged up last year, and even regardless, Kyle Shanahan is mercurial at best. But him getting injured in the first game is just like brutal. You're just like, oh, why did I do this to myself?
I have nobody to blame but myself. Why did I get?
That's how I felt with my Bengals survivor pick. I was screaming at the television. Of course, like I took the Bengals. How dumb is that? But
why? The Steelers beat the Bills last year. You know that MT is going to have his team ready for week 1, even if they end up winning 6 games. They're going to win. Oh, Sammy. I
mean, look, hold on. I'm not alone. There were a whole I think the top 7 survivor picks across whatever, a whole bunch of platforms, they all lost or something like that. The Titans were a really popular survivor pick, and they obviously got upset by the Giants. So I mean, it was a really weird week out there. But yeah, I mean, I'm just watching. I'm like, oh, he's gonna miss the kick. I know he's gonna miss the kick.
Oh, of course.
He misses the kick.
There was no doubt.
And then I was Googling, do ties count? And of course, it doesn't even matter because they lost the game.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I thankfully my survivor pick of the Bears played off. So no, I'm kidding. I'm not allowed to do survivor picks. So I don't think so. I can't do them for money. I don't. They make us do them, and they're like, "Cool, can I be in this?" I was like, "Don't be in the pool." So I got to sit here and promote. Okay, I get out.
Insider trading, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's because you're just such a big shot, Adam.
You know what? That's it. That's exactly what it is.
Heavy as the crown.
Heavy as the crown, exactly. Before we let you go, we do want to ask you, obviously waivers have been processed. Are there any guys that are still possibly available? Like if I got to go dumpster diving, once I get rid of Eli Mitchell, I'm going to free my life up because I'm going to be able to lose 4 49er running backs. Who are some of the guys that we could be looking at who could potentially pay off for you down the line?
Yeah, dumping Eli Mitchell, that's the equivalent of deleting your ex's contact information off your phone.
100%.
It's just cathartic. But yeah, no, I get it. I mean, a number of the popular ads, we talked about Carson Wentz, the pass catchers were pretty popular. Curtis Samuel went from 5 to 64% rostered overnight. Jahan Dotson, he's a guy that could still be available out there. He went from 23 to 40% rostered. Logan Thomas, I think, is still pretty available as well. So those three guys, especially with their matchup this week, could be worth rostering. In terms of like, even if you want to talk about this Thursday night game, I don't know when this comes out, but there's certainly some guys there like DeAndre Carter, who's still 8% rostered. He went from 1 to 8%. So he's going to be out there. Josh Palmer, he was, I think he played the most passing snaps of any of the players out there. So even though he didn't have the greatest fantasy game, Sterling Shepard actually looked pretty good. I mean, I hate to recommend Giants players that are not named Saquon Barkley, but he looks pretty good out there. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson is banged up. So could be a little bit more target share for him moving forward. And then, you know, if you are the Eli Mitchell person and Rex Burkhead happens to be out there, I think he's not a sexy name, but Sexy Rexy could at least give us a few weeks, because I think Dameon Pierce truthers were a little disappointed by his performance in week 1. Honestly, I thought that was pretty predictable. I thought that like with the rookie sort of situation, like they were going to probably ease him into it. I don't think this is like some big thing where you should be dropping Dameon Pierce or anything like that. I think you should have just expected this from the start. But in the interim, as they ease him in, Rex Burkhead might be the guy.
Yeah, I think for a 1 week pop, I think it's a pretty good idea to go out and get Rex Burkhead. And the Dameon Pierce thing, this is why it was comfortable drafting him in the 13th round. Got a little dicey whenever they started drafting him in the 4th. It's like, I love Subway. But I'm not paying $50 for a foot long, which is basically what that turned out to be.
Exactly. And he was consensus ranked as a top 24 running back going into week 1, like for week 1. And I was like, that's a little aggressive. That's a lot of pressure to put on a guy that, like, you know, never had a full workload at Florida, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's like, it's a little unrealistic on a team that we don't think that's going to put on that many points. So I think like he'll do well, especially if you got him in, what would you say, the 11th round? But I don't know that he'll pay off if you get him in the 4th.
Yeah, your roster is going to look a little thin if you use the 4th round pick on them. If you use them in the 13th, that's probably a little bit more comfortable. But listen, Samantha, where can everybody find you on the internets?
Sure. Yeah. So I am on Green Dot Daily. That is Action Network's daily show. You can catch that on YouTube and Twitter and whatever. I'm also on the Fantasy Flex every Monday giving out waiver picks, and Convince Me every Sunday before the game, talking about start sit and injuries and everything like that. And then all my written work is on actionnetwork.com. All
right. And you can follow her on Twitter at Samantha NFL. Again, one of the rising voices in the fantasy community. We're always very thankful when you take time to join us, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. There she goes, the great Samantha Previte. And what a great show it was today. Packers week is upon us. I can't wait. I think the Bears have an opportunity once again to shock the world. So keep those receipts. Keep cool, because I think good things are going to happen. Until next time, bear down. Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.